The ocean does not keep secrets. Swallows them. It buries them under miles of crushing, silent water, where light cannot reach and time moves differently. It is a realm of profound indifference, a vast blue cemetery for ships and sailors, for stories untold and questions unanswered. But every so often the ocean offers something back. Not a secret explained, but a mystery deepened. A question returned to the surface world, floating silently under a vacant sky. Our story tonight is about the greatest of these questions. A ship returned from the void, perfectly sound, fully provisioned, yet utterly, terrifyingly empty. This is the story of the Mary Celeste, the most famous and enduring ghost ship in history, a vessel that became a legend not because of what happened to it, but because of what didn't. Imagine, if you will, the afternoon of December 5, 1872. You are a sailor aboard the Canadian brigantine Dei Grazia, commanded by Captain David Morehouse. You are midway across the Atlantic, a lonely speck in the immensity between the Azores and the coast of Portugal. The air is cool, the sky a vast, indifferent blue. The sea is calm, rolling in long, lazy swells. For weeks, this is all you have seen. The rhythmic rise and fall of the horizon, the creak of timber, the snap of wind in the sails, the taste of salt on your lips. It is a world of profound and beautiful monotony, a world governed by wind and water. Then, something breaks the pattern. John Johnson, the helmsman, sees it first. A sail on the horizon about 6 miles off the starboard bow. This is not unusual in these shipping lanes, but there is something odd about it. The vessel is moving erratically, yawing in the wind as if drunk. It sails in a state of strange disarray. It seems to be sailing with a spectral crew or none at all. Captain Morehouse, a seasoned and respected mariner from Nova Scotia, raises his spyglass. A flicker of recognition, then concern. He knows that ship. It's the American brigantine, the Mary Celeste. The name is unmistakable. A chill, unrelated to the sea air, might have traced its way down his spine. He knew her captain, Benjamin Spooner Briggs. They were friends, men cut from the same sturdy seafaring cloth. They had dined together in New York at the Astor House Hotel just before their respective voyages began. Morehouse had set sail a week after Briggs. By all rights, the faster Mary Celeste should already be in Genoa, her destination. She should not be here, drifting aimlessly in the middle of the ocean. As the Dei Grazia draws closer, the sense of unease aboard his ship solidifies into a quiet dread. The Mary Celeste is under a strange and partial set of sails. Only her foretopsail and a single jib are set. They are tattered, ripped by winds the Dei Grazia had not experienced. She looks unwell, wounded and abandoned. Captain Morehouse hails the ship. "Ahoy, Mary Celeste!" His voice, accustomed to commanding the wind, carries across the water. The only reply is the groan of the ship's timbers, the lonely cry of a distant gull, and the soft slap of waves against the hull. He tries again, his voice tighter this time. And again. The silence that answers is heavier, more profound than mere quiet. It is a vacuum where human life should be. For 2 hours the Dei Grazia shadows the strange vessel, a cautious circling dance on the open ocean. Every man on deck is watching, speculating in hushed tones. Has there been a sickness? A mutiny? Is this some elaborate trap? The sea is full of stories. Finally, Morehouse can bear the suspense no longer. He gives the order. He dispatches his chief mate, Oliver Devoe, and 2 other seamen, John Wright and John Johnson, in a small boat to board the drifting ship and solve the riddle. As their small boat, the gig, pulls alongside the dark hull of the Mary Celeste, the sense of strangeness intensifies. The ship is not actively sinking. There are no gaping holes in her hull, no scorch marks from a fire, no splintered masts from a catastrophic storm. She simply floats, a silent wooden enigma. Devoe and his men hail her one last time before climbing aboard, their boots thudding onto the deck with a sound that seems unnervingly loud in the oppressive quiet. The deck is empty. The wheel spins freely, not manned, not lashed. They move through the ship, calling out names: Briggs, Richardson. Their voices swallowed by the silence. The ship is wet, very wet. There is water sloshing in the spaces between decks, nearly 3.5 feet of it in the hold. But this is not an alarming amount for a vessel of her size at sea. More importantly, it was not enough to warrant abandoning ship. They checked the ship's pumps. One of the 2 pumps is disassembled, its pieces laid neatly on the deck, as if for routine maintenance. The other, however, is in perfect working order. With a few minutes of work, the ship could be pumped dry. She was entirely seaworthy. They descend into the crew's quarters in the forecastle. The space is damp and disordered but not ransacked. Bunks are empty, but the crew sea chests are closed and their belongings, oilskin boots, sou'wester hats, even money and pipes are still there. It looked as if the men had just stepped away, intending to return at any moment. They move aft to the officers' and captains' cabins, the heart of the ship. Here, the mystery deepens into a chilling domestic tragedy. In the first mate's cabin they find the logbook. The last entry is dated 9 a.m. on November 25, 10 days prior. It records the ship's position as being just off Santa Maria Island in the Azores, about 400 nautical miles from where she was now found. The entry is routine, meticulously logged. It gives no hint of trouble, no sense of panic. Simply stops. A slate in the captain's cabin showed a position logged at 8 a.m. that same morning. 10 days of silence. The captain's cabin itself is a portrait of interrupted life. It is tidy, almost serene. On a sewing machine stands a small vial of oil, used for lubricating the needle. It is balanced perfectly upright, a testament to the calm seas the ship must have recently sailed through. A child's dress lies unfinished on a chair, a needle still threaded in the fabric. A melodeon, a small reed organ belonging to Captain Briggs's wife, Sarah, is in its place. There are books, toys, and clothing. It is a home, suddenly and inexplicably vacated. The ship's papers, its register and clearance documents, are missing. The captain's navigational instruments, his sextant, his chronometer, crucial tools for any mariner, are also gone. And most critically, the ship's single lifeboat, a small yawl that should have been stowed on top of the main hatch, is missing. The davits it would have been launched from are unharmed. The evidence suggests it was launched deliberately, not torn away in a storm. The galley, the ship's kitchen, offers more baffling clues. The stove is cold and out of place. There are ample provisions, tins of meat, barrels of flour, casks of fresh water. Enough food and water to last for 6 months. Nothing seems to have been touched by intruders. Finally, the cargo hold. This is perhaps the most significant part of the puzzle. The Mary Celeste was carrying 1,701 barrels of raw, denatured alcohol, shipped by Meissner, Ackerman and Company, destined for Genoa, Italy. This was a valuable and potentially volatile cargo. The hold is opened. The barrels are all there, stowed correctly. All 1,701 of them. When later inspected in Gibraltar, it was found that 9 of these barrels were empty. These 9, it turned out, were made of a more porous red oak, while the vast majority were made of sturdy, less porous white oak. But there is no sign of a massive leak, no overwhelming smell of alcohol fumes that would indicate a recent, dangerous event. The cargo is, for all intents and purposes, intact and worth a small fortune. Imagine the scene that confronted Oliver Deveau and his men. A perfectly good ship sailing on its own. A valuable cargo largely untouched. Food and water to spare. The personal belongings of the crew, left behind as if in a hurry. A final log entry that speaks only of the mundane. But the people, 10 souls, have vanished from the face of the earth. Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, and the 7-man crew gone. The lifeboat is gone. It is as if, in the middle of a normal day, The entire complement of the Mary Celeste decided to step off their sturdy, 282-ton vessel into a tiny fragile boat in the middle of the vast, unforgiving Atlantic Ocean, and were never seen again. This was the puzzle presented to the crew of the Dei Grazia. This is the riddle that has captivated historians, sailors, and storytellers for 150 years. It wasn't just an abandoned ship. It was a scene frozen in time, a maritime Marie Antoinette, its last moments of life interrupted for reasons unknown. To even begin to understand how such a thing could happen, we must go back. Back to the beginning of the voyage, back to the ship's own troubled history, and meet the people who were so utterly erased from their own story. The ship we know as the Mary Celeste was born under a dark star. She was launched in Nova Scotia in 1861, christened the Amazon. From her very first voyage she seemed cursed. Her maiden captain, Robert McClellan, contracted pneumonia just days into his command and died. On that same voyage, she collided with a fishing vessel. In the years that followed, she suffered a series of misfortunes that would make even the most stoic sailor wary. She ran aground, was caught in a storm that wrecked another ship she was meant to rescue, and was eventually abandoned after running ashore at Cape Breton Island. She was a ship sailors whispered about, a vessel that seemed to attract bad luck. In 1868 she was salvaged, sold to American owners, and underwent a major refit. She was enlarged, repaired, and her name was changed to Mary Celeste. The name change was a common practice, a maritime baptism intended to wash away the sins and bad luck of a vessel's past life. For a time it seemed to work. Her new captain, and a part owner, was the man who seemed the very antithesis of bad luck. Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs was 37 years old, born and raised in Marion, Massachusetts, into a family with salt water in its veins. He was one of 5 brothers, all of whom became sea captains. He was a devout Christian, a teetotaler, and a man universally described as fair, competent, and steady. He was not a man given to panic or rash decisions. This voyage was a significant step in his career. He had invested his own savings into the vessel he now commanded. He was, by all accounts, the ideal man for the job. For this voyage to Genoa, Captain Briggs made an unusual and ultimately fateful decision. He decided to bring his family. His wife, Sarah Elizabeth Cobb Briggs, was the daughter of a reverend and was as comfortable with sea life as he was. With them was their cherubic 2-year-old daughter, Sophia Matilda. To make room for his family, Captain Briggs had the captain's cabin refitted, making it more comfortable and domestic. Their 7-year-old son, Arthur, was left behind to stay with his grandmother, Sarah's mother, so he could attend school. We can only imagine the heartbreaking farewell on the docks of New York, the promises of return, the image of little Arthur waving goodbye to his parents and baby sister, never to see them again. That quiet domestic tragedy is the true beating heart of the Mary Celeste mystery. The crew Captain Briggs assembled was small but, on paper, highly competent. The first mate, Albert G. Richardson, was an American, a friend of Briggs, and a man so respected by the ship's primary owner, James Winchester, that he considered him a future captain. The second mate was Andrew Gilling, a young but experienced Dane in his mid-20s. The cook and steward was Edward William Head, an American. The 4 general seamen were all Germans who had signed on in New York. The brothers Volkert and Boz Lorenzen, Arian Martins, and Gottlieb Gutschad. Critically, contemporary reports and investigations found them to be a peaceful, capable, and sober crew. There was no known history of mutinous behavior or significant animosity among them. They were simply professionals hired to do a job. On a cold, blustery Tuesday, November 7, 1872, the Mary Celeste was towed out of New York Harbor's Pier 50. The weather was rough, a classic nor'easter blowing through, but the ship was sound. She sailed into the gray expanse of the Atlantic, a self-contained world carrying 10 souls and a potent cargo, on what should have been a routine journey to Italy. For the first 2 weeks, everything seemed normal. The ship's log, written in Captain Briggs's hand, is a testament to the quiet routine of sea life. He notes the weather, the ship's position, the sails being set or taken in. On November 15th, he notes passing the Azores to the north. The final entry, on the morning of November 25th, is chilling in its banality. At 5 o'clock, eastern point of St. Mary's bore SSW 6 miles distant. That's it. That is the last known written record from anyone aboard the Mary Celeste. 10 days later, she would be found by the Dei Grazia, drifting and empty, a silent testament to an unknown, and perhaps unknowable catastrophe. The crew of the Dei Grazia made a courageous and difficult decision. They would attempt to salvage the Mary Celeste. This required splitting their own crew, leaving the Dei Grazia dangerously undermanned. Chief Mate Oliver DeVoe and 2 other sailors took command of the ghost ship. For nearly 800 treacherous miles, the 2 ships sailed in tandem towards the nearest major port with an admiralty court, the British territory of Gibraltar. When they finally arrived, they did not find answers or gratitude. Instead, they found suspicion, accusation, and the beginning of a legal nightmare that would cement the legend of the Mary Celeste forever. The man they encountered in Gibraltar was Frederick Sollyflood, the Queen's proctor and attorney general for the colony. Sollyflood was a man of immense ego and stubborn conviction. He was a man who saw conspiracy in every shadow, and from the moment he heard the story, he was utterly convinced that a terrible crime had been committed. The idea that a crew would abandon a perfectly sound ship for no reason was, to him, preposterous. There had to be foul play, and his suspicion, sharp and unyielding, fell squarely on the men who had found the ship, Captain Morehouse and the crew of the Dei Grazia. Sollyflood constructed a narrative of greed and violence. His theory was that the Dei Grazia crew, tempted by the valuable cargo of alcohol, had conspired with the crew of the Mary Celeste to stage a disappearance or worse, had caught up to the Mary Celeste, murdered everyone on board in a drunken brawl, and brought the ship to Gibraltar to claim the lucrative salvage reward. He was a bulldog, and he tore into the case with a terrifying zeal. He had the Mary Celeste minutely examined by divers and inspectors, looking for any shred of evidence to support his dark fantasy. And he found what he thought was proof. A sword was found tucked away in the captain's cabin, and Sollyflood declared it had been stained with blood. He pointed to deep gouges on the ship's railing, claiming they were made by an axe during a violent struggle. He claimed to have found stains of blood on the deck. The media of the day, hungry for a sensational story, ran with these claims. The tale of a bloody mutiny or a murderous salvage crew spread like wildfire across Europe and America. But under the cold light of scientific scrutiny, Sollyflood's case crumbled into dust. The blood on the sword was tested by a local analyst and found to be nothing more than rust, possibly mixed with some kind of fruit stain. The axe marks on the railing were determined by experienced shipwrights to be normal wear and tear from the ship's rigging over years of service. The stain of blood on the deck could not be positively identified as such. There was simply no evidence of a struggle. Furthermore, the logic was flawed. Why would a murderous crew, intent on stealing the ship for its salvage value, throw a 10-person crew overboard but leave the personal valuables and, most importantly, the incredibly valuable cargo of alcohol completely untouched? It made no sense. The salvage court hearing dragged on for 3 excruciating months, a public torment for Captain Morehouse and his men. They were treated not as saviors but as suspects. In the end, the court had to concede that there was no evidence whatsoever of foul play. But Sollyflood's poison had done its work. The crew of the Dei Grazia were awarded a salvage payment, but it was a paltry sum £1,700, only about 1/5 of the ship's total insured value. The judge, in his final ruling, implicitly censured them, a permanent stain on their reputations for having done nothing more than bring a ghost ship back to port. And so, the first and most obvious theory, foul play, was officially dismissed, but never truly erased from the public imagination. But if it wasn't murder, what was it? The court's failure to provide an answer opened the door to a flood of other explanations, ranging from the logical to the utterly fantastic. And this is where the unsolved maritime mystery of the Mary Celeste truly begins to take shape, becoming a canvas for our deepest fears. Let's examine the theories one by one, like turning over stones in a dark wood, unsure of what we might find beneath. We can divide them into categories: human malice, natural disaster, and the bizarre. First, let's revisit foul play, but from a different angle. If the De Grazia crew was innocent, could the crew of the Mary Celeste have turned on their captain? A mutiny? This theory posits that the German crewmen, perhaps fueled by the alcohol cargo they were transporting, rose up against Captain Briggs and First Mate Richardson. In the ensuing struggle, Briggs, his family, and the first mate were killed and thrown overboard. The mutineers then made their escape in the lifeboat. But this theory is riddled with holes. Captain Briggs had a reputation for fairness. There was no known friction on board. The German crewmen were described as peaceable. And again, why would they leave their own belongings, money, and pipes behind if they were escaping? A mutiny is a desperate act, but it is usually planned. The scene on the Mary Celeste speaks not of planning, but of sudden panicked flight. What about pirates? The romantic image of swashbuckling pirates attacking on the high seas is compelling. But by 1872, the age of piracy in the Atlantic was long over. The Barbary pirates of North Africa had been suppressed by the American and European navies decades earlier. More importantly, pirates are above all thieves. Their goal is profit. They would have ransacked the ship, taking the cargo, the navigational instruments, the ship's papers, and the personal valuables of the crew. The state of the Mary Celeste is the very antithesis of a ship that has been raided by pirates. Nothing of value was taken. This brings us to the more fantastic theories, the ones that have allowed the Mary Celeste to sail into the realm of folklore. Could it have been a sea monster? A giant squid, the kraken of legend, its colossal tentacles rising from the depths and plucking the crew from the deck one by one? It's a thrilling cinematic image, but it defies logic. Why would a monster take all 10 people but leave the ship and its cargo completely unharmed? Why would the crew have time to neatly launch the lifeboat? And then there is the paranormal. Was the Mary Celeste an early victim of the Bermuda Triangle? It's a common association, but a geographically impossible one. The ship was thousands of miles away, in the North Atlantic. But the idea of a mysterious zone that swallows ships and planes taps into the same primal fear of the unknown. Was it aliens? A UFO descending and abducting the crew for some inscrutable purpose? Again, it's a theory born of modern anxieties, one for which there is zero evidence. The story of the Mary Celeste requires no aliens to be terrifying. The simple, unanswered question is frightening enough. To find a plausible answer, we must abandon fantasy and return to the cold, hard clues on board the ship itself, to the physical evidence. And here several more rational and in some ways more chilling theories emerge. Let's start with the cargo. 1,701 barrels of denatured alcohol. As we know, 9 of those barrels were found empty. These 9 were made of porous red oak, not the sturdy white oak of the others. This single fact is the cornerstone of the most enduring and scientifically plausible theory for the fate of the Mary Celeste. The theory goes something like this. The ship sailed from the cold of a New York November into the warmer, sunnier climate of the Azores. This significant change in temperature and air pressure would have caused the highly volatile alcohol in those porous red oak barrels to vaporize and expand. The pressure inside those 9 barrels built up day by day until it reached a critical point. The result was not a catastrophic, ship-destroying explosion, but a powerful percussive release of vapor. A loud, terrifying boom or whoosh from the cargo hold, forceful enough to blow the heavy main hatch cover off its seating and send it flying. Now, place yourself in the shoes of Captain Benjamin Briggs. You are a cautious man. You are responsible not just for your crew, but for your wife and your 2-year-old daughter. Suddenly, you hear a deep, violent sound from below decks. The hatch cover, weighing hundreds of pounds, is thrown into the air. You smell the pungent, flammable fumes of raw alcohol wafting up from the hold. You don't know the extent of the problem. For all you know, the first blast was just a prelude. The entire cargo is about to go up in a massive fireball that will obliterate your ship and everyone on it in an instant. What do? You don't have time for a detailed investigation. You make a command decision based on terrifyingly incomplete information. The first and only priority is to get your family and your crew to safety. You order the immediate evacuation of the ship. You have them launch the lifeboat, the small yawl. To be safe, you issue a critical order. Pay out a long tow line and tie it to the Mary Celeste. The ship's main peak halyard, a long and strong rope, was found to be missing, and is a likely candidate. The plan is sound. Wait in the lifeboat at a safe distance, see if the ship explodes, and if the danger passes, they can simply pull themselves back to the safety of their vessel. They are all in the lifeboat now, a tiny, vulnerable craft in the vast ocean. A fragile human chain connected to their ship and their salvation by a single rope. And then the unthinkable happens. The wind, which had been calm, suddenly picks up. The sails, still partially set, catch the gust. The Mary Celeste lurches forward, and the tow line, perhaps hastily tied in the panic, snaps taut and breaks. Or perhaps it simply came undone. Suddenly, their sturdy, seaworthy ship is sailing away from them. It is faster than they can possibly row. They watch, helpless and horrified, as their home, their salvation, gets smaller and smaller on the horizon, becoming a ghost ship leaving them to their fate. Adrift in a small, open boat with little food or water, their chances of survival were effectively zero. They would have succumbed to the elements: starvation, thirst, exposure, or capsizing in a sudden squall within days. Their bodies and their story were swallowed by the Atlantic. This theory is elegant. It is compelling. It explains almost everything. It explains why a competent captain would abandon a perfectly good ship. It explains why the lifeboat was missing, and why it appeared to have been launched deliberately. It explains the missing navigational tools. Captain Briggs would have grabbed them in the hope of navigating to land if necessary. It explains the lack of panic in the final log entry, because the event was sudden and overwhelming. It provides a reason for the 9 empty barrels. For many years, and for many serious researchers, this has been the leading explanation for the fate of the Mary Celeste. But it is not without its critics. Would a small vapor explosion, with no accompanying fire or charring, really be enough to terrify an experienced captain like Briggs into abandoning his ship so completely? Some argue he would have hove to and investigated further. The lack of any scorch marks or soot around the main hatch remains a sticking point for some. This leads us to another, equally compelling natural theory: a seaquake. An undersea earthquake or landslide can create a sudden, violent, but highly localized disturbance on the surface. It can also release large amounts of methane gas trapped in the seabed, which could create a frightening, bubbling cauldron on the surface of the water, and could even temporarily interfere with the ship's compasses. A different but related theory is that the ship was struck by a waterspout. A sudden violent column of air and water could have been terrifying. It might have dumped a massive amount of water on the deck in a short period, leading the captain to believe the ship was taking on water much faster than it actually was. Remember, the ship's pumps were a known point of concern. The disassembled pump found on deck proves they were having issues. In this scenario, Captain Briggs might have made a fatal miscalculation. Fearing the ship was foundering after a frightening, inexplicable natural event, and with his pumps not working to his satisfaction, he orders the evacuation. Just like in the alcohol theory, they get into the lifeboat intending to stay close by a tow line, and are tragically separated from the ship when the weather turns. This theory also accounts for a sudden, panicked, but rational decision to leave a vessel that appeared, in that terrifying moment, to be doomed. Then we have a darker, more bizarre medical theory. It involves the ship's food supply. Specifically, the rye flour used to bake their daily bread. Rye is susceptible to a fungus called Claviceps purpurea, or ergot. When ingested, ergot can cause a horrific condition known as ergotism, historically called St. Anthony's fire. The symptoms are the stuff of nightmares. They include painful convulsions, gangrene that causes the limbs to rot and fall off, and severe psychological effects. Mania, psychosis, and terrifying hallucinations. Could the crew and passengers of the Mary Celeste have been slowly poisoned by their own bread? Could they have, in a collective fit of fungus-induced madness, simply thrown themselves into the sea? Or, in their paranoid, hallucinating state, launched the lifeboat and fled from the imagined demons and monsters they saw crawling on the ship's rigging? This would explain the sudden, irrational abandonment of a perfectly good ship. It's a deeply unsettling thought. A crew driven insane, turning their vessel into a floating asylum. While possible, there is no direct evidence. No contaminated flour was found, but they almost certainly would have taken their immediate bread supply with them into the lifeboat. It remains a fringe but fascinatingly grim possibility. Finally, there is the simplest theory of all, the one that requires no explosions or monsters, only the fallibility of human judgment. Human error. Let's look at the facts again. The last log entry places them near Santa Maria Island in the Azores. They were having trouble with their pumps. The chronometer was known to be inaccurate. It's possible Captain Briggs, worried about the pumps, unsure of his exact position due to the faulty chronometer, and believing he was closer to the island than he was, simply made the wrong call. He might have seen the shore in the distance and decided to abandon his potentially leaky ship to make for the safety of land. He misjudged the treacherous currents of the Azores, or the weather turned unexpectedly, and their small, overloaded boat was swamped or swept out to sea. In this version of the story, there is no single dramatic event. There is only a good man, a loving husband and father, trying to protect his family and his crew, who made one fatal mistake in a place that does not offer second chances. The story does not end with the salvage hearing. The Mary Celeste herself, the silent protagonist of our story, seemed to carry her curse with her. After the trial, she was sold and resold, passing through 17 different owners in the following decade, a pariah of the seas. No one seemed to want her for long. Her reputation preceded her. She was a ship of death, a bad luck charm. Her final voyage was in 1885, under a captain named Gilman Parker, a man of nefarious intent. He conspired with a group of Boston shippers to deliberately wreck her on the Rochelies Reef off the coast of Haiti, as part of a brazen insurance fraud scheme. He filled her with a worthless cargo of old boots, scrap rubber, and cat food, insured it for a fortune, and intentionally ran her aground. But even in her destruction, the ship seemed to have the last laugh. She refused to sink quickly, her stubborn hull holding fast to the reef. The insurance company investigated, the fraud was exposed, and Captain Parker and his conspirators were arrested. Parker was ruined and died in poverty. The wreck of the Mary Celeste was set on fire, but she refused to burn completely. Her stubborn skeletal hull remained visible on the reef for years, a final ghostly monument to her own legend, before the sea finally mercifully reclaimed her. In 2001, a marine archaeology expedition led by author Clive Cussler claimed to have found her remains, ensuring her story would surface once again. And what of the people? The 10 souls who vanished into the Atlantic air? They were declared legally dead. Their families left to grieve a loss they could never truly comprehend. Captain Morehouse, the man who found the Mary Celeste, returned to the sea but was forever haunted by the public suspicion that followed him. The families of the German crewmen in Europe waited for years for news that never came. And little Arthur Briggs, The boy left behind in Marion, Massachusetts, grew up an orphan, a child whose entire immediate family was consumed by a mystery. He would live a long life, eventually marrying and having his own family, but he always carried the unique and terrible weight of being the sole survivor of a family lost to an impenetrable maritime legend. He was hounded by reporters and crackpots for his entire life, each with a new theory, each reopening the wound that never fully healed. It's also crucial to note how the myth of the Mary Celeste was shaped. Much of what people think they know about the case, the meal still warm on the table, the tea still steaming in the cups, the cigar still smoking in an ashtray, is pure fiction. These details were invented by a young writer named Arthur Conan Doyle, years before he created Sherlock Holmes. In 1884, he wrote a short story called J. Habakkuk Jeffson's Statement, a fictionalized account from a supposed survivor. The story was a sensation, but it hopelessly blurred the line between fact and fiction, cementing the popular, more theatrical version of the event in the public consciousness. The reality, as we have seen, was quieter, but infinitely more mysterious. In the end, we are left where we began, on a calm sea, looking at an empty ship. We have theories, probabilities, and deductions. The alcohol vapor explosion seems the most likely culprit. A panicked evacuation due to a misread danger from a seaquake or waterspout is also highly plausible. But we do not have an answer. We will never have an answer. The ocean does not give up its dead. And it does not give up its secrets. And that is precisely why the story of the Mary Celeste endures. It is the perfect mystery. There is just enough evidence to build compelling, logical theories, but not enough to prove any single one of them beyond a shadow of a doubt. The story is a void, and our human minds, which abhor a vacuum, rush to fill it with science, with logic, with superstition, with fear. It is a story about the fragility of our existence when pitted against the overwhelming, indifferent power of nature. It is a profoundly human tragedy, a story of a family and a crew who went to work one day and simply ceased to be. It is a chilling reminder that no matter how much we map and chart the world, no matter how much we think we know, there are still empty spaces on the map, still questions that will never be answered, still ghost ships, real or metaphorical, sailing on an endless, silent sea, their decks empty, their destinations unknown. The Mary Celeste was found floating, but her 10 souls remain lost. They are lost to time, lost to the sea, and lost to a story that has become far larger than they ever were. They have become permanent residents of the world's imagination, the eternal, silent crew of the most famous and haunting ghost ship of all time. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into one of history's greatest unsolved maritime mysteries. The story of the Mary Celeste is a powerful one, and the lack of a definitive answer is what allows it to continue to haunt us. What do you think is the most plausible explanation for what happened? Was it a freak natural event, a tragic human error, or something else entirely? Leave your theory in the comments below. I read every one of them. And if you enjoy these explorations into the strange, the forgotten, and the unexplained, please consider subscribing to our channel and turning on notifications. We have many more stories to share with you. Many more journeys into the quiet, mysterious corners of history. Until next time, sleep well.